If there was ever a sitcom that deserved to be called Kino, Community is that show. For those of you that are streets behind, Community is a television series about a group of misfit students and unlikely friends who attend a completely dysfunctional Greendale Community College. Known for its pop culture references, meta humor, and a heavy focus on story structure, Community is regarded as a cult classic and one of the best television programs ever created. I've been a fan of Community since it was struggling to find an audience on TV. But thankfully, since it has come out on Netflix, I've noticed a huge surge in interest for the show from a brand new generation of fans. It's great to see Community finally getting the recognition it deserves. And rewatching the series again for the millionth time made me want to do a video on it. But I actually want to start with something I don't see talked about too often. And there's a reason for that. What I'm about to bring up isn't going to be easy to hear. I want to talk about Season 4. I know, but bear with me. For those of you who don't know, Community was created by Dan Harmon, who based the series on his own community college experience. Dan was the showrunner for the first 3 seasons, but was let go by NBC before the 4th season due to personal and professional problems he was going through at the time. The show's writing definitely suffered without his involvement, and this season is disliked by both fans and the cast themselves. Even in the show itself, they reference how weird and out of place that year of their life was.
Oh, there was that gas leak last year.
Oh, don't blame it all on a gas leak year. This is a 4-year process.
I definitely agree that Season 4 was the worst season of the show. Its episodes don't have the same emphasis on story structure and pacing that made the rest of the series so great. But even in this AT&T of seasons, there are a few moments I feel deserve to be recognized. Here are my top 5 favorite moments from Season 4 of Community. Number 5. Advanced Introduction to Finality.
We finally figured out a way to make paintball cool again.
No, you didn't. The season finale revolves around Jeff, who is finally accomplishing his goal and graduating from Greendale. But as Jeff struggles to decide if he can return to his old lawyer life, the Darkest Timeline invades to ruin this reality as well. The Darkest Timeline was first introduced in the Season 3 episode Remedial Chaos Theory, which is regarded as one of, if not the best episodes of the show.
From now on, I'm Evil Abed. We are the Evil Study Group, and we have but one evil goal. Return somehow to the prime timeline, the one that I stopped you from rolling that die, then we destroy the good versions of ourselves and reclaim our proper lives.
And since then, it has popped up in a number of episodes across the series, most notably in the Season 3 finale, Introduction to Finality, where Evil Abed takes over and tries to cut off Jeff's arm with a rotating saw. However, this iteration of the Darkest Timeline was not nearly as cool as that. In fact, it was pretty lame. It's a forced, tensionless conflict that barely makes any sense, even though we know it takes place entirely in Jeff's head. The only thing I can say that I actually liked about this episode is they at least foreshadowed the conflict in a number of episodes across the season. In History 101, we see Evil Abed and his saw. And at the end credits of Intro to Knots, we see Evil Jeff getting Evil Annie out of the insane asylum. While this episode isn't great, we at least get some sense of closure on the most infamous running joke throughout the series. Number 4. Basic Human Anatomy. This episode is about Troy and Britta, who have been dating for almost a year at this point. As their anniversary comes up, Troy pretends to do a Freaky Friday with Abed, so he doesn't have to break up with Britta himself. Later on, though, he realizes that he needs to be a man and tell her how he feels. Troy and Abed switch back, and he and Britta end their relationship on good terms. Meanwhile, Annie and Shirley team up with the Dean, who of course is pretending to switch bodies with Jeff, to take down Leonard, who is set to be valedictorian. This episode was actually written by Jim Rash, who plays the Dean. Jim actually won an Oscar in screenwriting for the film The Descendants, and it definitely shows in this episode. This is probably the strongest episode of the season in terms of emotion. It walks a delicate line trying to balance the wackiness of body switching with the very real emotional development Troy and Britta need to go through, and I think it succeeds. There's a really touching scene where they hug at the end of the episode, showing that despite breaking up, they're still friends. Plus, the Dean as Jeff was hilarious.
When I switched bodies with Jeffrey,
Nope.
I thought I knew what it would be like to have Jeffrey inside of me.
That did not happen.
But as it turns out, having Jeffrey inside of me
Nope, again.
only brought out the worst in me. Which is to say, having Jeffrey inside of me
No one was inside of anyone.
was wrong. To have Jeffrey inside of me.
Shut up.
So I'm sorry.
Number 3. Herstory of Dance. In this episode, Britta tries desperately to organize a dance with Sophie B. Hawkins as the entertainment, in order to prove to the group that she isn't the airhead they all think she is. Meanwhile, Abed dates Captain Marvel. Again, this is a little thing, but I love Pierce in this episode. I honestly think Pierce wasn't utilized to his fullest extent on the show. He was often just the butt of jokes, and that was one of the reasons I think Chevy Chase left this show. But not only was he really funny when given the right material, he genuinely cared about the group, and did a lot for them without ever seeking attention. In Season 1, he slept with the new Spanish teacher, so she would make the final easier. In Season 3, he took the blame for Jeff's psychotic breakdown in biology, so that he wouldn't have to be the bad guy. And in this episode, he has a really sweet moment where he defends Britta, and gets Sophie B. Hawkins for her dance.
Also, I didn't like the way you were being such a jerk to her.
Well, she was acting crazy.
Yeah, but what choice does she have? You make fun of her, you use her name as a synonym for screwing up. Cut her some slack, Jeff.
Chevy was definitely an asshole on set, and basically everyone hated him, but Pierce the character was an important part of the study group, and his departure from the show still makes me sad. Maybe he'll have a cameo in the movie.
Well, after I got shot, I faked my death to teach you all a lesson.
Lesson about what?
Who can remember? It was more than a year ago.
Number 2. Advanced Documentary Filmmaking. This episode is another documentary-style episode, this time focused on Chang, who has suffered from a rare form of amnesia, of course called Changnesia, and is now a new, kinder person named Kevin. Jeff, however, is the only one who doesn't believe him, and sets out to expose him as a fraud. I'll admit, the Changnesia subplot was dumb and quickly abandoned. Even the supposed city college invasion that it hinted at never materialized. Which is a shame, because I wish we could have learned more about Dean Spreck's history with Dean Pelton. And seeing that giant mechanical spider would have been awesome. But despite the flaws of Kevin's story, the scene where Jeff finally accepts him is a really touching moment. It might just be the new Radical song playing, which I love, but it really does work to tie everything together emotionally. Plus, Abed's documentaries are always awesome.
Our first assignment is a documentary. They're like real movies, but with ugly people.
Number 1. History 101. The plot of this episode is that the group is going into their 4th and final year at Greendale. Abed, who can't deal with his friends possibly leaving him, retreats into a fictional sitcom in his head. When I first watched this episode, I was blown away. I honestly thought the show might even be better without Harmon. What impressed me so much with this episode is the way that it perfectly parodied bad sitcom tropes. Abed's Happy Community College show is obviously riffing on multi-camera sitcoms like 2.5 Men or Big Bang Theory. The laugh track, the corny jokes, Pierce being recast. They even had those dumb hashtags every show was using at the time to generate more interest. Like you were supposed to tweet things like hashtag Troy and Abed back from summer as you watch the show. It was a perfect parody. Then I saw the next episode, and the hashtags were still there. And I realized then that the show wasn't making fun of those dumb tropes, it was just doing them. It was one of those situations where you think someone is being really clever and pretending to be dumb, when in reality they are just that dumb. But despite the fact that this episode might not have been as smart as it first seemed to me, I still rank this as one of my favorite episodes from one of my favorite series, right behind Greendale Babies.
Greendale Babies will be right back, forever!
Well, fellow human beings, that's all I had to say for this video. If you haven't, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment letting me know your favorite moments from Community.